Definitely, my name is Niki, and I identify as a woman in long-term recovery. I have addiction issues. I've had substance use disorder, I think pretty much from whenever I can remember, sugar being the first substance I think I ever was addicted to and stole after. All the behaviors that came along with my addiction started really young. I was addicted to approval. I learned how to read at a really young age, and I would read book after book till like 4 o'clock in the morning, regardless of what I had for things going on the next day, like school or activities. I couldn't put the book down. Addiction, had captured me right from the get-go. I know that when I found horses were my next addiction, and I always tell the story like I found the barn where I grew up, and the guy that owned the barn, Herbie, would let us shovel stalls in order to be able to ride the horses for free. So I was a maniac at shoveling stalls. Like, I wanted the horses so much, I would have waded through waist deep crap in order to ride. And that kind of like sums up like all of my addiction. Like, I would go through whatever I needed to get what I wanted. So that is like the beginning of my addiction, and the whole idea that I would do anything, you know what I mean, to get what I needed to feel okay. It blossomed from, pretty innocent things like reading books and horses to boys. I am, addicted to having a crush on somebody. Like, that's part of my addiction. And I would hang out with guys when I started to get a little older, when I was a teenager, and if they were drinking or smoking weed or whatever, like, I just participated. I was more interested in their attention at that point. And that was like a big part of how I dealt with, being part of with them, was that if that's what they were doing, they would like me more if I did that. So I started drinking and smoking weed and found that I loved the way it made me feel. So I would just do it more and more. And I was funnier, I was smarter, I was prettier, I was like all the things these guys would want, or at least in my own mind, that's what I thought. And I would do whatever was necessary for their attention. So that meant, those things. I don't know. I went to, I was a really good student in school with very little effort. I seemed to just naturally be easy to do academics wise. I remember when I was younger, I guess I'm thinking about all of the judgment that I felt that was against me, and a lot of the times like why I ended up drinking and using more was to hide these feelings of separateness from like all my classmates. My classmates were really good at sports, and I remember missing the ball in kickball in 3rd grade and people like making fun of me and just being like, I don't want that. I don't want to be made fun of. So I avoided things like that. So whether or not I was good at something, it was dependent on your approval whether I would continue to do it. So the things I were good at were school, with the academics, and band practice. I loved band, I excelled at it. And when music stopped working, and I found that alcohol and drugs made me feel better, I started doing more of those and less of the music. I think that, my addiction really took off when I went to college. I was able to do what I wanted. I no longer was under my parents' roof. I didn't have to have a curfew. I could hang out anytime, anywhere, and I had made a best friend, and oh my God, we partied, and that was like being known for the girl that like had a great time, never got sick. Like, I took pride in this idea that I could drink exorbitant amounts of alcohol and never get sick, and that I was the last one to pass out, and so I was the best at everything I did. Again, approval was really behind it all, but the drinking brought me blackouts. It brought me sleeping with people that I didn't want to be sleeping with. And in my freshman year of college, when all this partying really blew up, I ended up pregnant with my son. So that was the first time that I realized that maybe like I needed to slow down and start doing things right. So for the next 8 years, I did really well. I I would only drink on weekends after my son was born with friends. That was the norm. And I, did pretty well. I went back to college. I dropped out of college when I was pregnant for him, and then I went back to college when I was like 23. And I was really successful again. I picked up that academic side of my life. I did really well. I ended up in Honor Society, president of the Math Club, president of the Math Honor Society. And I say that now and think, wow, Niki, like you did awesome. But I can tell you at the time, I felt like a complete fake, and I felt like people are gonna find out that I'm not as smart as they think I am. I'm not as organized. I'm not as good of a leader as they think I am. And I had that constant pressure feeling they're gonna find me out. Like people are gonna know that I'm not everything that I'm putting out there. And I hated that feeling. So I think I was toward the end of my college, pretty much right around when I graduated, I ended up started using cocaine with a friend of mine a little bit to party, and I started getting back into this idea of like feeling good. Like cocaine gave me that up feeling that I wanted, and I could tell the truth and be okay with it, and everything was great. So that went on for a little while, and then I met a guy, and he was like the love of my life, and just loved the way I felt when I was with him. And 6 months in, I found out he was a heroin addict, and he was trying to get clean. And he warned me, I'm going to be detoxing, it's going to be horrible, and of course I'm going to be the best girlfriend in the world, because that's my game, being the best at whatever, if you're going to love me or approve of me. So I would jump through hoops. I spent money to make sure he had enough drugs to wean off of and not be as sick, and really just did whatever he needed to be okay, and so that I could be okay. And I was scared to death for them. Like, I didn't really know. Everything I knew about heroin, what came from the movies, it was going to lead you into like bare rooms with mattresses on the floor and spoons and needles and candles and just, newspapers. And I don't know, that's this image I had. And, but they were coming home, and then they would go to bed, and they would still go to work, and everything seemed for the most part pretty, I would say normal, but not like what I thought. And but I felt left out when they were gone, and I hated that, and I just wanted to be part of, and it brought me back to when I was in high school and like all of those feelings. And it ended up I did exactly what I did then, and I started using along with them. They knew that I had used cocaine before, so my boyfriend decided that he would bring me home a little bit of cocaine, and that would make me feel part of. And by the end of the night, I'm ready to keep going because I'm doing the cocaine, and they're ready to stop and go to bed because they're doing the heroin. And my boyfriend gave me a little bit of heroin to try to help bring me down, and I was in love, and it was the best and worst feeling in my entire life, because I knew at that moment that I would be willing to die to feel the way I felt when I had the heroin. Like, I didn't care. I literally knew in my soul that this was absolutely the worst thing that I could ever do, and it was probably going to kill me, and I was okay with it. And like that right there, it defined my addiction like nothing else had ever defined my addiction. I think that I just didn't care. I just didn't care. Like, that feeling that I wanted was there, and I had finally found it, and I finally discovered that this was what I'd been looking for. I had a sense of freedom and a sense of, it's hard to put into words. And I think, if you know, you know, and if you don't, please don't know. Really. So that was the beginning of a 10-year spiral of drug use, and absolutely becoming a person I wasn't. I was no longer the girl who was the president of the Math Honor Society. I was no longer the girl who was the, did really well in school. I was no longer any of that. I was the girl driving the getaway car. I was the girl that had people shooting out of the car at other drug dealers. I was the girl who was helping to steal things from businesses, friends, and different stuff. And I was just everything that I hated, you know, in other people. I became that. And 10 years of that. It took 10 years of that. It wasn't until through a series of events I ended up moving back home to Maine to try to get clean, to try to get, you know, sober from the drugs, and couldn't. That, you know, it was a series of events that got me there, that I finally was like, I need to do something different. My son looked at me one day and knew that I was lying to him again. And there was just a look that day of disgust in his eyes, and I couldn't handle that anymore. And I decided at that point that I had to do something different. And I called for help. I called the 1-800 number and I asked for help. I asked for some rehab information, and I ended up at a rehab here nearby in Wyndham. And I went there for 15 days, and then I ended up in a halfway house in Portland at Crossroads for Women. And I knew that I was 40 years old. I knew that I had 40 years of behavior and beliefs that I needed to work on. So I knew it was going to take longer. So I went to a halfway house with that expectation to learn more about it. And honestly, I'm so grateful that I finally asked for help. I remember calling my mom and saying, can you take me to this intake appointment at rehab? And the look of relief in her, the look of relief that she had, that like I was finally ready to get help, because she had never said anything to me at that point about where I was at. So my son dropped me off at rehab, and I feel like when I left that morning from a disgusting trailer that I was being evicted from, when I left that morning with a suitcase full of clothes that weren't even going to be useful at rehab, I just threw it together. I knew I was going to a different life, and I think that I was like hopeful for the very first time in my life, and that hope like fired me up for the first time. And I might have probably definitely drove people nuts at rehab, because I was like, all that optimism that I had like stuffed down in me, all those hopes and dreams and positive vibes that I am as a person, like naturally, literally burst out of me like a volcano, like a volcano. And I know I drove people insane. Like I know I did, because everything was amazing and beautiful and pink cloud. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I've been sober for almost 9.5 years, and I feel like it's still that way. I definitely did the right thing coming into recovery. To not just learn about my disease, but also to like learn that like women are not scary and intimidating, and my competition, that like women are there to support me and to lift me up. And all that excitement and everything that I like felt about recovery, I tried to put into learning more about being around women and stuff. And that's not saying that I didn't have like a lot of growing to do in the men category, because my early recovery was still filled with like a lot of my addictions, other than drugs, you know, and men had been one of them. Food, I came in and I gained 100 pounds right away, like literally in a year. But I was still happy, and I was still hopeful, and I was still all these things, you know, and I was learning about my disease and learning how everything changes, you know, and you deal with things as they come. You don't fix everything overnight, you know. I was super fortunate in the beginning to be exposed to the Portland Recovery Community Center as one of the resources that I was able to utilize for recovery, and started building a network of people that was as my crew of people, the people I grew up with in recovery, my litter mates I call them, and we all would like hang out, and we would do fellowship, and we would have fun events at the recovery center, and there was a lot of laughter and a lot of positivity, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful I had that. I don't know if I would have received that where I'm from in Aroostook County. I don't think I would have had that same setup. And so yeah, I rode the pink cloud. Like, I am a 12-step recovery person. I have done my recovery mainly in the 12 steps. I have supplemented my recovery with things like Hope Group at the Recovery Center, church. I have utilized women's groups. I try to keep an open-minded thing, and whatever I need in my recovery, like as it comes up, I try it, and if it's helpful to me, I keep using it. I've fluctuated back and forth between sister programs in recovery, various 12-step programs, and just try to keep growing in a spiritual way and helping others. Like, things that I've learned and hold on to from my earliest recovery is to be of service to other people. Like, that's the number one priority that I work on, is the less I can think of myself and the more I can think of others, the better my life seems to turn out. When I get stuck in like the selfish wants and needs of Niki, like, I make myself crazy. Even today, 9 years sober, I can still fall into that same pattern, and it's kind of funny now. Like, it is what it is. I dealt with a lot of things in recovery. I think I was worried in the beginning. I remember 40 years old having my first mammogram of my life, and then having to have a second follow-up mammogram because they had found some abnormal growths or whatever, and thinking, I got into recovery to find out I have breast cancer, and I'm probably gonna die, but I'm gonna die clean. Like, I was able to learn how to flip all of these struggles and fears and things into a gratitude. I learned about gratitude. I didn't end up having breast cancer. That wasn't the issue, but it helped me to form this habit of knowing that I could make it through various trials without getting high, that I could make it through life on life terms without having to use a substance or to drink or to numb out. And I don't know, like that is still amazing to me. Like, you don't have to get high when bad stuff happens. You don't have to change a feeling. You can actually feel the feeling and walk through it, and then it goes away and a new feeling crops up. Like, the feelings never last forever. So that's been pretty eye-opening, I guess, like inspiring to do. I dealt with some deaths in recovery. I've dealt with getting fired in recovery. I found out that all of those behaviors that could get you in trouble don't go away overnight. You actually have to work on them. I've done an amends on taking money that wasn't mine within the program, misappropriating funds, and learned that part of that is I had come from a place of not having enough from a young age, and I had learned how to get myself what I needed, and that didn't just go away miraculously because I got clean. So, I had to learn that doing the next right thing meant telling somebody about these behaviors and asking for help and getting support around that stuff. So I don't have to take anybody's money anymore. Come to find out, I can make enough of my own money, and that I already have enough, and I already am enough. So those kinds of things have been such a gift to know. I was able to, I had like 4 years sober, and I was able to open up a sober house through the help of a fellow person in recovery who had a women's sober house. And I did that for a couple of years, and actually had one of the lowest years of my life. I had like 5 years sober, and I hit one of the lowest periods of my recovery, and was very unsure how to go about getting help again. I felt stuck again. I was crying all the time. I didn't know what was wrong. Everything in my outside life was great, but I couldn't stop crying, and I couldn't stop And when I was able to talk about it with people, because that's what I've learned to do, I was able to talk about it with others. Some suggestions were made that maybe I see a therapist, and I was diagnosed as having depression. I filled out the questionnaire that they have, and oh, you're clinically depressed. You had all these big life events happen in a short amount of time. And, I had to look at getting outside help and get on medication for a little while to restabilize. And I learned that I could do those things in recovery, that I could have trials and bad times and still come through them and have, and not lose hope, and not lose that hope. The next hardest thing I did was when I made a decision to close the sober house. I had come through the depression, gone through a breakup, had my life on life's terms, and realized that somehow all of the reasons why I had opened the house had shifted, and I was now worried what the recovery community would think about me if I chose to step out of this role as a sober house owner. And for the first time in my life, I realized that it isn't the people outside of me that make me important. It's me and the knowledge of myself that allowed me to know that I was important, with or without a sober house, with or without a boyfriend, with or without the perfect job. And I made a really hard decision, and I decided to close the sober house. And I remember the feeling that morning when I actually made that decision. I had this moment of calm and peace and ease that I didn't have to be anything other than who I was in that moment. And who I was a woman who needed to not be running a sober house, who needed to just focus on herself and take care of herself. So one of the things that I learned is that the validation from outside people doesn't make or break who I am. I actually am a good person exactly how I am. And that's taken me a while, and I can still struggle with believing that at times, because that's true. But I know that's true, and it's what I would tell somebody else. And another thing in recovery is I learned to speak life over my own life of what I would say to somebody else for advice or encouragement. I do that to me now. Like, I empower me and turn that encouragement back to myself. And those are like such valuable things that I've learned. I think today in my recovery, like, I don't know, like, I've been dealing with things like, it's layers, right? Like, I am, I've dealt with the men, I've dealt with the drugs, obviously, and the alcohol. I've dealt with now with the approval and the need for, for validation and stuff. And now I'm in a season of my recovery where I'm dealing with my first addiction, which was sugar and food, and, how all of that has really impacted my life throughout the years. I've struggled with weight my entire life, since I'm 10, 11, 12, when I remember really feeling the effects of being chubbier and needing people's approval. So literally I have gained and lost weight in my entire life, fad diet after fad diet, did all of the different stuff. And this past year, about a year ago, I'd had enough. I was like, I can't keep doing this like this. I experienced a level of surrender around food and stuff, and I asked for help, just like I did for my recovery. And I asked for outside help from experts, like doctors who deal with health issues, And so I asked the right people this time, and that was like, duh, light bulb moment, like, oh my God, duh. And I went through a process and went through a weight and wellness program. And this summer I had gastric sleeve weight loss surgery in July. And since then I've lost 45 pounds. I've refound my motivation. Like, when I talked earlier about coming into recovery and being hopeful and positive and excited and jazzed about recovery, like, that's how I am now about my health journey. So now I am into taking care of me, and like, because I'm worth it and I want to live and I have this amazing life that I want to support. And it isn't about approval anymore. Like, I got over that. I needed people to like how I looked and stuff like that. I don't care about that part. I don't want to die of a heart attack. I don't want to end up with diabetes or high blood pressure. Like, I actually love who I am. I actually love Niki and want her to like live past 50. So that's my recovery journey today. I am excited right now. I'm helping a group. We're starting a new women's group, so I'm excited about that. And just being part of a community of people that try to help others. One of the coolest things I get to do right now is I get to write for a magazine. Like, never did I expect that I would be a writer. And the minute I just told you that, I remember that I have always been a writer. When I was younger, I won a Young Authors Institute in my class for 5th grade. I wrote this chapter story called The Adventures of Tango Amelia, which was a flying horse, and her owner, which was a young girl, probably at my age at the time. And they had adventures and basically saved a dog, and I think in another one of the adventures saved a kid from drowning, and just like these different hero type adventures, like everything I wanted to do when I was growing up, which was to have a flying horse. Duh. And but anyway, that I was a writer and I had lost that. And when I started working, so the magazine I write for is Journey Magazine. Journey Magazine is amazing and is all about amplifying hope. So that mission that we have to amplify hope and recovery and make recovery visible for other people is like I don't even know the word I want. Like the highlight of my life is to be able to write for this magazine and to step into ownership of my own journey in recovery, in that I am a writer, and I get to help people with my writing and amplify hope for them by utilizing my own talents and skills. And like how cool is that, and that I can own it and say it today without being like, oh, I think maybe I'm a writer, I don't know. And I just am. So that is one of the highlights. I work a job that I love. I work with students at a school and I love it. What else do I get to do? I am an active member of my church. I love my church. I love the people, being with a group of people who are like-minded and focused on the same thing, and that's huge. So I don't know, I think like my life's pretty awesome right now.